Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 159 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. And how about you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
All fired up for a brand new episode of Unsolved.
Yeah, same here, man.
We just got done recording an episode of True Crime All the Time. Pretty fascinating, I thought. It's an episode on William Scott Day, lesser known for sure.
But what a sick individual.
Yeah. I mean, you know, for somebody that murdered as many people as he did and escaped prison a number of times, you know, it's kind of a fascinating case to not be one that you really hear a lot about. Right. You and I kind of questioned it on the episode. Why is that? You know, why is it that some murder cases or murderers become extremely infamous and grab the news cycle and all that, while
others you just never hear about?
No, other cases, it's not just the murderers, it's the victims, right? Because when the murderer hits the news cycle, well, the victim does as well.
Right. Exactly right.
In some of these cases where, for whatever reason, it doesn't grab hold, well, you don't get to learn about the victims either.
And all murder is senseless, but these ones just really don't. There was no reason to do what he did.
No, he didn't have to murder anybody.
No,
to do what he wanted to do. So, but make sure you check that out. So you been good?
Yeah, hanging in there. You know, staying healthy as I can and just getting by, man. Day by day, doing what needs to be done.
Yeah. How's your mental health? Because I know you're not seeing as many people as you're used to seeing.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
It can be. I know.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's a little, you know. When you live by yourself, you know, like I said before, I haven't really, besides on FaceTime, seeing my kids, you know, but I haven't like spent time with them. So that's always, you know, I mean, your kids are here, you're spending a lot of time with them, and I know that brings you a lot of joy.
It does.
And I miss my kids, but I know right now it's what we got to do to keep them safe and, you know, people in their life as, you know, safe from this virus too.
Well, it's interesting because the only time that you and I are not quarantined is when we're together.
Yeah.
When we're recording.
And someone, you know, asked me that a couple of days ago, and I said, I'm not going anywhere. He and his family's not going anywhere.
Nope.
And if we thought we would ever put each other at jeopardy,
we wouldn't do it.
We wouldn't do it. We'd just go ahead and, you know, find another route to get by until we could.
Yeah. I mean, to the point where, you know, my daughters, their boyfriends aren't allowed over. They're not allowed to go to their house. I mean, we've been pretty strict with it.
I mean, look, as soon as I pull up here, you know, my hands has been sanitized in my car. I know when I walk through that door, your wife has me go right to that sink, and I wash my hands longer than 20 seconds.
What? It's funny because my wife has a thing of Clorox wipies on a belt, and she just walks around just wiping stuff off. Yeah. Now, I mean, you know, we joke about it. It's not a joking matter, but I do think it's important to point it out because people have said something about it. You know, why is it okay for you guys to get together? Well, that's why we think it is.
Right.
You know, if you're quarantined and I'm quarantined and we're not seeing anybody.
Yes.
When you come over, we still should be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm leaving my house, coming right here and going right back.
Yeah.
There's no in between.
I don't even go to the store.
Yeah.
I really don't. So I'm in this basement studio pretty much all day, every day.
Yeah. I mean, your life hasn't changed at all.
It has not. It was like that before.
It was.
All right, buddy. We have some new Patreon supporters, and we actually had just an amazing amount of new Patreon support and people that were already on Patreon making the decision to up their donation to help us get through, right? Everybody's struggling a little bit with something. Some people are not affected financially, which is great, right? They can work from home. Their job's not been downsized or anything like that. So some people have been able to help out a little bit more, and we appreciate it very much. We had Brittany Burke.
Hey, Brittany.
Scott Barnhill.
Hey, what's going on, Scott?
Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
Stephen Fitzpatrick.
Hey, Fitzpatrick.
Kara Brahms.
Hey, Kara.
Tierney Ricks.
What's going on, Tierney?
Jenna Blakesley.
Hey, Blakesley.
Tina Salderberg.
Soderberg.
Nikki Crane.
What's going on, Nikki?
Jenny Shea.
Hey, Jenny.
Lexi.
Hey, Lexi.
Brenda Gallo.
Hey, Gallo, man, it's like a wine.
Emily.
Hey, Emily.
Barry Clark.
What's going on, Barry?
Phoebe Terry.
Was that Phoebe Terry?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say Taylor, and then I realized it was Terry, but we'll go with it.
Hey, what's up, Phoebe?
Marisol Jacobo.
Hey, Marisol.
Allie Pratchler.
What's going on, Pratchler?
Dee Riddell.
Hey, thanks, Dee.
Jack Allen.
What's going on, Jack?
Elizabeth Ballinger.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Hannah Cortade.
What's going on, Hannah?
Susie Rose.
Hey, Susie.
Derek Pfaff.
Hey, Derek.
And Branka Lukanovich.
Hey, Branka.
So, brand new support. We appreciate it very much. And if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected John Monica.
What's going on, John?
Been with us a long time, and it's very much appreciated.
We really do.
We had some great PayPal support as well. Michelle Robinson.
Hey, Michelle.
Eve Truitt.
Hey, what's going on, Eve?
Daniel Javier.
Hey, Javier.
And Ebony Hamachek.
Hey, Ebony.
All right, Gibbs, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am, man.
We're talking about the 1974 Morningside Murders in Sioux City, Iowa.
Do you want to do like that song from Sioux Studio? When you say Sioux City, I do.
Do you?
You don't get that same vibe?
Mm-mm. Phil Collins?
Yeah.
Is that Genesis or is that just Phil Collins?
I think is that Genesis?
I don't know.
Might have been a Genesis.
I think it might be Phil Collins. I don't know. I know it's Phil Collins. I'm just not sure if it's
either way. It was Phil Collins.
Either way, it was Phil Collins. But this is a case that, there's some mystery here. I think it will be perplexing to some people. It was on Tuesday, December 3rd, 1974. Harriet Isom had become concerned when her husband called from work to say that their 27-year-old son, Ernest W. Isom Jr., who they called Billy, and his 26-year-old friend and roommate, Jesse James Hanni, missed work on Monday, December 2nd, and hadn't shown up yet. On that Tuesday, December 3rd, they both were employed as boilermakers for a New York company at Port Neal Station, constructing an electrical generating plant. Harriet asked her next-door neighbor and friend, Dorothy Stewart, to come with her to her son's house. And they drove over to 1117 Morningside Avenue, where Jesse and Billy lived, along with Billy's girlfriend, 24-year-old Freta Bostic. There had been a pretty recent snowstorm, and it had covered the yard, the driveway, the cars. It was a pretty good snowstorm.
Yeah, man, it covered up everything. So when they pulled up, they could see that there was no tire tracks, no footsteps. So again, to them, it appeared that nobody had come or gone from that home in days.
Harriet and Dorothy arrived, and they entered the home through the unlocked front door. They called out, but they got no response. So they headed to the kitchen, and immediately they saw Harriet's son Billy and his girlfriend lying face down on the living room floor. Gibbs, they were covered in blood.
It had to be terrifying to see that.
I can't think of a more nightmarish situation for a parent. I just can't think of one. They then looked across the room into the dining room, and that's when they saw Jesse sitting there covered in blood, propped up against the door with his legs stretched out on the floor.
Yeah, you can actually visualize that, just again. I mean, this is Billy's good friend, so his mom knew Jesse as well. And I don't know how long I could stay in there if I saw this. I'd be freaking out. I'd want to get out and try to get some help.
Yeah, I mean, you would. At the same time, there would be an instinct, I think, to run to your child. And I think that happens in a lot of cases with husbands and wives, parents and children. Okay, we know it's not good to disturb the crime scene.
Right.
But how do you look at a parent who goes over to cradle their dead child and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that.
Right.
You tainted the crime scene.
Yeah. If you wouldn't have touched them, we probably could have got something off of that body.
Yeah. You tell me that if I get in that situation, I'll tell you what, I don't care.
Yeah. I want to hold my kid. I'm going to hold my kid.
I think the urge to do that would be so strong.
Yeah.
That even if you were a very common sense person or knew a lot about forensics, even if you just watch CSI,
sure,
you're not thinking of that.
No, all that goes out the window at that time.
All you're thinking about is that your child is dead and you're devastated and you want to get over there and hold them as quickly as you can.
Sure.
Harriet was hysterical, and she and Dorothy ran across the street to a service station, and they called the police at 11:45 a.m. Police showed up at the house on Morningside fairly quickly. And once they got inside, they saw what was described over the phone, but now they're seeing it in person and they're seeing it in much more detail. They saw that Billy was completely nude, lying face down, but his legs were propped up on a mattress that just happened to be, laying on the living room floor.
Kind of like a makeshift bedroom.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that do that, right? They're not putting the mattress up on a set of box springs or elevating it. They just throw it on the ground and sleep. And
last time I stayed the night here, you didn't even give me that. You're like, there's a floor has carpet on it. You'll be okay. I was like, oh, all right, thanks.
Here's what used to be a pillow and a shoddy blanket.
Yeah, that's like the pillow you guys must have had for 10 years. It's all worn out.
But it is the living room, too. So it was almost as if they were making another bedroom, a makeshift bedroom. Next to Billy was his girlfriend, Freta, and she was wearing nothing but a bathrobe. Her legs were outstretched towards the fireplace. Jesse was in his clothes. He even had his winter coat on, and again was propped up against a hallway door in the dining room. All three bodies were covered in blood from several gunshot wounds. Police also found a couple of dogs in the home. They were alive. One was locked in a bedroom, and the other was roaming free throughout the house. The other thing that police noted, Gibbs, is that inside the house, the temperature was over 80 degrees.
It was extremely warm, and they couldn't figure out why it was so hot in there.
Well, and we talked about it. This is Sioux City, Iowa.
Yeah.
In early December, snowstorms, it's cold.
Right.
So I get it. The furnace is going to be on, but who sets it at 80 plus?
Especially young. They were young, right? Why would you? I mean, I can get that if I go over and see my mom. She might have it set at 74.
Okay, 74 is not 80 plus.
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
80 might have been my grandparents back in the day. 80. And I would have been there in and out probably in 5 minutes. Yeah. All right, good seeing you. Gotta go.
See, I always thought that, as people get older, I get it. They do need a little warmer.
Sure.
But they also get a little cost conscious.
Yeah.
Many of them.
Sure.
So it's a balancing act between, okay, we want to be warm, but we don't want this bill to be too high.
That's right.
But nobody sets their thermostat at 80 plus.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
On purpose.
No.
The next day, the medical examiner, Thomas Corridon, performed an autopsy on the three victims. And he was able to determine that they were all killed by gunshots, but he quickly changed the victim count from 3 to 4 after figuring out that Freta was 4 months pregnant. He reported that Freta had been shot twice, once from the front into her chest and once from behind through her back into her lung. And that's the shot that actually killed her, according to the ME.
And obviously, once she died, the fetus died.
Now, Jesse had been shot twice, one shot into his chest, and the fatal shot was determined by the ME to be to the back of his head. But Gibbs, Billy was shot 5 times, once in the chest, once in the back, once in the neck, and twice in the head.
Pretty brutal. All of it's brutal.
It's all brutal.
Yeah.
5 shots seems like overkill to me. The medical examiner put the time of death for all 3 sometime between late Sunday, December 1st, and early Monday, December 2nd. When the medical examiner prepared the death certificates, he listed Freta as Billy's common law wife. The Iowa Bureau of Criminal Investigation was also on site to take tissue, blood, and urine samples so that they could get those off to their labs. So Gibbs, I think this is the point where we want to talk a little bit about the victims. Now, there's not a lot out there, not a ton of information on the victims, but here's what we have.
Yeah.
Jesse James Hanni was born on November 22nd, 1948 in Billings, Montana, to Eddie and Audra Hanni. He had a brother named Ray. He graduated from high school in 1967 and then joined the Army. He served in Vietnam as a rifleman in the 4th Infantry, but Jesse also had a criminal history. Fairly petty, shoplifting, some drug possession charges, and these were all pretty much after he came home from the war.
Yeah, I mean, nothing heavy. Nothing major.
No, I didn't get it where he hurt anyone. He did some things he probably shouldn't have done, but just not a ton on his early years. Jesse was buried in Billings, Montana at the Sunset Memorial Gardens. Freta Bostic was born on August 19th, 1950 in Greensboro, North Carolina. Not much at all on her as far as parents and childhood information. But like Jesse, she had a small rap sheet for drug use, some drug sales. Again, nothing major. She did have a charge for credit card and check fraud. Freta Bostic was buried back in Greensboro at the Westminster Gardens.
You know, they grew up in the late 60s, early 70s when, I think pretty huge population was smoking marijuana, you know, maybe doing a few other things.
I was going to say, there was quite a few other things too. I mean, you know, when you're talking about the 60s, wasn't that LSD and tune in,
open,
drop out, whatever that saying was? There was a lot of experimentation going on.
Sure.
For sure.
So it wouldn't be uncommon to be arrested for smoking marijuana or anything else, you know?
Well, I don't know if it was uncommon, but, you know, also look at somebody like Jesse. I think you and I talked about it a little while ago. People coming back from Vietnam, you know, it changed a lot of people.
It sure did.
And did it change Jesse? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe he was into some of that stuff before. But we do know a lot of people picked up their drug use habit in Vietnam.
Well, sure did, yeah.
Because there were a ton of drugs over there.
And that's what a lot of them did to get through that mess.
Yeah.
You know, they needed that.
And when they came back, they had to have it.
Sure, they already had the addiction to it.
Ernest William Billy Isom II was born on September 2nd, 1947 in Hammond, Indiana. To his parents, Ernest Sr. and Harriet Isom. He had a little rap sheet too for using and selling drugs. Billy was buried in Arkansas City, Kansas, in the Parker Cemetery. So we get the Wednesday morning. Gibbs, police didn't by this point have a whole lot in the way of clues. They also didn't have a lot as far as motive for these murders.
Well, and they also said the house was in order. It wasn't really ransacked at all. So it didn't look like robbery.
Now, they had some clues that they didn't release to the public or the media at that time. It's not a lot, but they were holding some things back. You mentioned, didn't appear to have been a robbery, but investigators were able to lift 10 fingerprints and clear all but one. So pretty quick work with the 9, right, that they were able to match. They got this one that is a little tougher. They said back then to figure it out, they would have to manually go through books and books of fingerprints and just try to match it.
Yeah, I guess when they found these fingerprints, they took the fingerprints of anybody that's ever been in the house that they could recall. So they got the family members and the friends, and then they were able to clear those off because of the prints that they had from those folks.
That's how they got the 9. But they're really interested in the 1.
Yeah, who's this 1 belong to?
Because that's probably somebody that we need to know about. The problem is they didn't have the technology back then, right? There was no computer system that contained everybody's fingerprint. And
right.
You just type in a command or click a button and boom, it starts comparing. Now, what the police theorized was that Jesse and Freta tried to flee their assailant as Billy was being shot while he was sleeping on the mattress in the living room. Police also discovered that Jesse's green 1971 Datsun.
There's a car you haven't heard in a long time.
Datsun. You haven't heard that make in quite a while. They were pretty big for a period of time in the 70s when you started to see a lot of Toyotas, a lot of Datsuns. You had the oil embargo in the later 70s, in the late 70s. You started to see this influx of foreign cars. And Datsun was a pretty big one there for a time.
They had some sporty ones too.
Well, and then later on, they also, I was going to say they came out with what a lot of young people really liked. Some of the, 280ZXs or.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Before Nissan bought them out.
But they figured out that Jesse's car was missing. And so they put an APB out for it. I think with the thought that maybe the suspect or the killer or killers had stolen it. Billy's mom said she heard from her son on Saturday night, briefly, and he said that maybe they would all try to stop over Sunday for a bite to eat, but they never did. Another friend told police that they had stopped by the home on Morningside later on Sunday evening for a visit, but no one answered the door. And police found out that, all three individuals, all three victims, had moved into the Morningside home just a month before the murders occurred. They moved in on the 1st of November.
Billy and Freta had just moved from Arkansas City, Kansas. Jesse had been living in Roberts, Montana before coming to Iowa, but he knew Billy and Freta for a while, as Billy and Jesse had been on other jobs together as that they were both Boilermakers.
The police eventually let out in the press that they did find 2 guns at the crime scene. A .357 revolver was found inside a lunchbox in a car parked out in front of the driveway of the house. It was a 1968 blue Pontiac Club Coupe with Colorado tags that was believed to belong to Jesse. Police also found a .357 inside the home, but they would not confirm whether either of these handguns were the murder weapon. Police also said that they did find some marijuana and opium inside the home, but it was in very small quantities. So the day after the APB went out on the car, 2 men walked into the police station to tell police Jesse let them borrow the car, and I'm assuming Gibbs, they were a little scared. They didn't want anyone to think that they had anything to do with these 3 murders.
I sure wouldn't want that.
Police looked into their story, their alibis, and also had them take lie detector tests. And everything checked out. And they passed the lie detector tests as well. They were released.
That's the last time we borrow somebody's Datsun.
Yeah, and you could probably pretty much tell that. I mean, if they were guilty, are they really going to walk into the police station and say, hey, you better check us out.
Right.
He let us borrow this car. I want to make sure that we're not, fingered for these murders.
Yeah.
Just days after the murders, police did arrest 25-year-old Van Chadwick and his girlfriend as they were driving through Carlsbad, New Mexico. And they became persons of interest because police found out. They fled Iowa on the day that the murders were discovered. I think the other connection was that Chadwick had worked with Billy and Jesse as a Boilermaker. All 3 of them were Boilermakers.
I think there was some thought that maybe that Van had been involved with Jesse and Billy with some labor dispute at the plant that they worked at. And there was speculation that they were on opposite sides of the labor dispute.
The pair was charged and questioned, but they did agree to take a lie detector test, which they both passed. So eventually the charges were dropped and no further action was taken. And it was days after this that a meter reader came forward to say that he was at the home early Tuesday morning, knocked on the back door, and no one answered. But it was unlocked, so apparently this guy went in because the meter was in the basement, not on the outside of the house.
He had to do his job, I guess.
So he's like, I'm getting this done. He walked in, went down to the basement to get the reading. As he went to the basement, he saw a woman lying on her side on the floor. Now, he said he thought she was sleeping or possibly passed out. He did not want to disturb her. He also said that he really wasn't paying all that much attention or enough attention to see the others.
Yeah.
According to him, he was just trying to get in and out as fast as he could.
Find it a little strange.
It's a little strange when we describe the crime scene.
Yes.
And the fact that it wasn't too hard to see multiple people, multiple victims at the same time. So to say that you just saw her is a little strange.
And wouldn't you want to say, hey, knock, knock, I'm coming in. And when they don't respond, wouldn't you want to say, hey, you all right over there? Because I don't know if it would be normal to see somebody laying on their side in the living room and they don't even budge when you come in, and then you come back up out of the basement and they're still in the same position. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole thing's a little strange. Okay, in 1974, is it normal to walk into somebody's house to get to the meter if they're not home? I don't know. You better not walk into my house even if the front door is unlocked.
They're going to be laying on the ground if that happens.
There's going to be multiple 9mm popping out from all directions.
Yeah.
But this is Sioux City in 1974. I imagine there were a lot of people back then that didn't lock their doors, and maybe it was more normal than I think.
Just, hey, gotta let the meter guy do his thing.
Police learned that Jesse's girlfriend from Montana had been staying at the Morningside home too, but she had gone back to her family home in Steamboat, Colorado, just days before the murder.
Kind of lucky, actually.
Very lucky.
Yeah.
The Iowa Bureau of Criminal Investigation was able to conduct a phone interview with her, along with a local detective out there. They questioned her for almost an hour. And it was during this call that police learned, basically from her confirmation, that Billy and Jesse had been selling drugs. She also told them that a year prior in Denver, Jesse was arrested for selling drugs, but prosecutors gave him a choice. They said they would not charge him if he gave evidence on some of the big Denver drug dealers, and he took it. He did it. The only other thing that she added in her interview was that she and Jesse broke up just after the Thanksgiving holiday, and she went home to her parents. So they did learn some information.
Yeah.
Some pretty vital information. I think most notably the fact that, according to her, there was some drug dealing going on.
So you add that along with the marijuana and the opium. I mean, though it was small amounts, it was still found at the murder scene.
What's something they're going to want to figure out for sure. As police continued their investigation, one detective recalled that this was not the first time that people had died inside this house. Back on January 19th, 1972, 2 bodies were found inside the home. It had been the town's dentist, Dr. T. Lawson, and his wife, Olive. At the time, they had both been in their 70s, and they died of natural causes, apparently at the same time, which seems very strange.
It's extremely strange. It's like that Notebook show you like, when he climbs in bed with her at the very end, and they both pass together.
Are you giving away the ending of The Notebook?
Well, it's only been out for like 20 years, so if you haven't seen it by now...
you think it's that old? 20 years?
I think it is. I don't know. It's maybe at least 15.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's very strange. I've heard of a lot of spouses, especially when people have been married a long time, when one of the spouse dies, the other one seems to die fairly soon.
Yeah.
Afterwards. I don't know if I've ever heard of 2 individuals, spouses, dying from natural causes on the exact same day. That seems very strange.
But it's also like 1972. This was like the dentist for the whole town for so many years. Maybe that's what they put in the article just to make it okay for everybody to move forward.
Well, that could have been. Still seems strange.
I think it seems extremely strange.
Police also talked to the home's owner, the person who was renting to the 3 victims. His name was Kent Hansen, and he said he rented the house to them for just 2 months because the funeral home next door had purchased it. They were going to use it as additional parking, and they were set to take possession of the house at the first of the year. Now, when you talk about the community, they were in shock, right? This was not something that happened on a routine basis. The city had been pretty calm lately. Now, they did experience a triple murder in 1970 committed by Robert MacArthur. MacArthur decided his wife shouldn't be talking to other men. Sounds like maybe he was a little jealous.
Extremely.
So one day in September, he grabbed his shotgun, told his wife he was going to kill the neighbor she had been talking to, and come back to kill her.
And he meant it.
And he meant it. He walked up the street. He shot the 18-year-old neighbor, killed him right there in his own yard. And then he started to come back to his house. And that's when he saw his wife make a run for it across the street to where her parents lived. She made it. She got inside her parents' house and asked them to lock the doors and said Robert was coming to kill her and he had his shotgun. So her dad went to lock the back door, and as he did, there was Robert who shot him, and her dad died a few days later. Robert shot his wife through a window, and just as his wife's mother tried to pull her to safety, Robert kicked in the door, shot his wife again to make sure she was dead. He looked at his mother-in-law and said, "She will never wander up the street again to talk to other men."
This is brutal, man.
He lost it, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Some people are extremely jealous. They can go into jealous rages. I'm not that type. I'm not a real jealous person, but I know some guys that are. You better not even look sideways at their wife or girlfriend back in the day, because there's going to be a fight. If we were in a bar and somebody looked at their girlfriend the wrong way.
I don't know how someone could live that way.
No, I mean, it's not healthy, obviously.
And if you got to worry about whoever you're with all the time, probably shouldn't be with them anyway.
Yeah, you might want to find somebody else. But
yeah,
he was arrested very quickly and ultimately was sentenced to life in prison for the murders. On December 27th, 1974, this was almost a month after the Morningside murders, the Iowa Bureau of Criminal Investigation got back the results of the tissue, the urine, and blood samples, and they sent them to the medical examiner, stating that none of the victims tested positive for drugs. And I think that's very important. Gibbs, we talked about them finding, small quantities of drugs.
Right.
We talked about the fact that it was said they were dealing drugs. Some of them were, the 2 men at least. But yet, tests come back, no drugs in their system.
No.
What was inside at least Billy's system was a very high level of alcohol. He was intoxicated for sure at the time he was killed. The other 2 victims were at half the legal limit. So they probably had a couple of drinks.
Right.
Police knew that Freta had sex hours before she was murdered because they had collected semen. And it was determined that Freta's unborn baby was female.
So it sounds like maybe they, had some drinks, was having some fun, Sunday night before they decided to go to bed, but nothing too crazy, no drugs in their system. I don't think there's anything shattering in that information.
No, I don't think there is at all. I mean, the sex of the baby, which they may not have known, but that's not shattering. It's
right.
Enlightening, but it doesn't have anything to do with the murder for sure. As time went by, police began looking into rumors that the killings were related to a drug deal gone bad. There's speculation that Jesse or Billy or both had crossed another drug dealer, or maybe someone higher up, a supplier, and the dealer or supplier took revenge on them that night and killed everyone inside that house. On April 12, 1975, a grand jury heard testimony from an unidentified person about some events that occurred that night. But this is kind of shadowy stuff here, Gibbs, because nothing really further came from the hearing and the information was never released. So we don't know exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Now, it must not have been enough for the grand jury to move forward with indicting anyone, but it would be interesting to know what it was.
I mean, clearly the investigators thought it was important enough to try to push it in front of a grand jury. But like you said, we don't know what it was, and it'd be nice to know what that information was about.
Also in April of 1975, the house at 1117 Morningside, where the murders occurred, was demolished. And after that, it became the new parking lot for the funeral home next door. By the first anniversary of the murders, police had interviewed over 500 persons of interest. They had given quite a few lie detector tests. They had even charged a few suspects, but none of this went anywhere. The police looked into the days prior to the murders, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, Gibbs. There was a labor strike at the plant, and people walked off the job, right? Tensions were high, threats were being made. And at one point, they thought it might have had something to do with this labor strike, right? The victims were on one side. Maybe there was somebody on the other side. They got upset.
Yeah, pro-union, non-union. You're going to have those tensions.
But I think at some point, police figured out, these murders were not related to that issue, not to the walk-off, and not to the strike. Police made a statement that they were not going to release information about the murder weapon because they didn't want the suspects to get rid of it.
I guess that's like the only thing they could still hold on to, right? So if someone came in and said, I did it, and I used 22, then they can say,
no, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
Because we know it was this.
Right.
On November 14th, 1976, there was a strange, slightly related twist when 25-year-old Marlena Hansen was arrested for forgery. She was also arrested for committing perjury in a grand jury investigation. She had claimed that a man named Walter Sonny McGinnis had stolen the three victims' identities and was using them to get checks from the government in their names. She also made the claim that he had killed people before and might be the person who committed these three murders. Now, there's not a lot else about it, but it's interesting that this woman at least ties this guy or casts some suspicion in his direction.
Yeah, it was extremely weird.
Because outside of that, Gibbs, this case went cold. Police did eventually release the description of the murder weapon, saying it was a .380 caliber semi-automatic. They also mentioned they had collected some shell casings found inside the home, and they thought that the weapon had a silencer on it. And I think that came from the fact that they couldn't find anyone that heard shots that night. And like we said, there were quite a few shots.
Yeah, 8 or 9 shots had to be fired off.
Yeah, because one of the victims was shot 5 times.
Yeah. And I know a .380 is not super loud, but you still should hear that many pops, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a big caliber, but even a .380 makes a ton of noise. I mean, if you're in a neighborhood and somebody pops one off in the house next door,
yeah,
I have to believe you would hear it.
Especially after more than one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, one, you might not have even registered it.
Right.
But you hear 9 pops.
Yeah, you got your attention.
Something's going on. Now, you might think they're firecrackers or something like that. On March 11th, 1986, this was over 11 years after the murders occurred, the police chief pleaded with the Iowa State legislature to spend $3 million on a new computer system that would allow them to run the fingerprint. That one fingerprint that we talked about earlier, they still had it on file. Now, obviously, they were going to use all future prints to be run through this computer as well. They weren't going to spend $3 million to run one fingerprint. Right. But there was hope that, by having this computer, they could identify this fingerprint that had been sitting around for so many years. Apparently, it could scan 22,000 prints per second.
It's pretty dang fast.
Well, it's fast, and that's 1986. Who knows what the technology is today? I have no idea. I mean, if you look at that versus how much time would it take to look and manually compare even 1,000 fingerprints on pages.
Using the old magnifying glass, lining them up. Nope. Yep. That line looks similar.
And that's assuming you even get the match right.
Yeah.
That if you saw it, because your eyes are so tired from looking at so many fingerprints.
Could you imagine $3 million though for this? Definitely changed. It changed law enforcement's world.
It did. It's not a small amount of money,
right?
But I think it's money well spent.
Absolutely.
If you look at what it did to move forensics and law enforcement, into the digital age, is a big deal. And I think one of the big selling points that the police chief used was that, okay, this is what allowed California to finally catch the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
That's probably a pretty good selling point there.
Yeah, that's pretty compelling. He was a bad guy.
Yeah.
This is how we caught him. This is how we'll catch our bad guys. And they did eventually get the system, but when they ran the print through, no match.
Unfortunately, no.
On June 9th, 1992, a detective told the Sioux City Journal that he knew how the three were murdered, but he couldn't connect it to a person. He stated that when they went to interview Jesse's family back in Montana, Jesse's brother Ray told investigators some details. Ray said that Jesse had told him before leaving for Iowa that he had a plan to get rich. Jesse said that he and Billy were going to double cross a dealer that they had been selling for, and they were going to take all his money. And according to Jesse, it would be a huge payday, and it would give them more control in the drug trade moving forward.
Sounds like Tony
Montana.
The Tony Montana. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Tony Montana was on a much bigger scale than these guys were if they were selling drugs.
This is a smaller version of Tony Montana.
Okay. Yeah. Much smaller.
Yeah.
Ray said both Billy and Jesse always carried a gun because they had been dealing for a while, and it was mainly marijuana and opium. So Gibbs, I mean, there's a lot of questions, associated with this case. You have the drug angle. Did Jesse and Billy cross this dealer, and, a dealer, a supplier, or somebody, along that line came to the house and murdered everyone inside?
Yeah. Or did this dealer supplier hear about this plan and jump the gun and decide to take action first before they could do anything to him and just took him out that way as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of investigators felt that there was some truth to this angle. Now, exactly what it was, I don't know that they were ever sure. Yeah, and adding on to what you said, Gibbs, it's been theorized that the dealer sent his top enforcer to the house late Sunday night, or maybe even early Monday, to preemptively kill the competition, guys that he thought were coming after him or coming after his business.
Right.
The enforcer walked in, saw Billy on the mattress, and fired the first shot. And then Jesse, after seeing or hearing, or maybe both, grabbed his jacket, bolted for the door to try to get his gun from the car. He shot once to stop him from getting outside the house. The shooter then fired a shot at Freta, and then finished off Billy. Then went back to shoot Jesse and Freta again. Okay, it's a theory.
Yeah.
Now, to me, I guess it depends on what you mean by enforcer. If we're just talking about a thug who's going to walk in and start shooting, okay, I get that.
Right.
Because, the shooter did leave behind shell casing. So if you have an experienced person who kills people for a living, let's say,
a hitman,
is part of that lifestyle,
yeah,
I don't know if that's something that they would do. Not saying that a lot of killers aren't careless, but I'm not thinking this is a genius hitman.
Yeah, because why would a real hitman leave any shell casings behind?
No, they probably wouldn't. But also, if you're a mid-tier level drug dealer, and I don't know how big this person was,
right?
Do you have access to real top-notch hitmen? Or do you just have a thug that you tell to go do something?
Right, and he does it.
And that does not involve being smart enough to know that, hey, I should collect up these shell casings and all of that. And I will say that it seems, Gibbs, like most people believe this was done by one shooter. And part of that comes from the fact that nobody's talked about it. And the more shooters you have, I think
Sure.
the greater the chance that somebody would roll on somebody, especially if they got pinched.
And we know from previous cases, they like to talk.
Sure.
They like to brag. They like to tell of their small little victories in their head. Oh, I took these people out this one night.
And not only that, but they like to pull these type of things out if they get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, you got me. Let's make a deal.
Because I can give you this on a silver platter.
And the police would probably jump at the chance of solving this case because it's been unsolved for, quite a long time. So there's a couple of things it could be. It could be this drug deal gone bad or, power struggle within this drug dealing kind of relationship. It could have had something to do with the labor issues. To me, that one doesn't seem as likely, I guess.
Yeah, I don't find that feasible.
But either way, this case is almost 50 years old and still unsolved. And you figure by this point, most of the people involved would be, on the low end in their 70s.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to solve this one. I hate saying that.
Yeah.
Because I know that they have solved cases as old as this.
Sure they have. Mm-hmm.
But I think probably because of the way the murders occurred, no DNA makes it very difficult.
Yeah, if they don't have DNA, because that's the way you're seeing most of these cases, these older unsolved cases being solved, is the fact that, number one, they have DNA, but they collected it in a way that it was preserved.
Right.
That it wasn't shoddy. It didn't degrade over time to the point where, it's no longer usable. This would be a very tough case to solve. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Tragic.
No, it's very tragic. But that's it. That's the case of the Morningside Murders. Gibbs, we got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey guys, this is Mike from Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I wanted to suggest a case to look into. Don Lewis, that gosh dang Carol Baskin's husband that went missing on that Unsolved would be great. We're just over here in quarantine. That'd be a great episode for you guys to listen to. You guys are awesome. Love listening to it every Monday morning. That's a ticket.
So, Giz, we have gotten so many requests for that case.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of people have watched the Netflix show.
Sure.
Tiger King. I've seen it all the way through like 3 or 4 times now.
I guess they're going to drop a couple new episodes next week.
Oh, I hadn't heard.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to that.
I don't know what they have to do with, but they found a couple extras that are going to pop out.
Yeah, I don't know if it will have anything to do with the murder of Don Lewis. They gave some information, but it was pretty sparse.
Yeah.
Now there may not be that much out there either. So I do think it would be a great episode to do if we could get enough information. So it's one we'll look at for sure.
Absolutely.
What's up, Mike and Gibby? This is Jason, longtime listener out of Oklahoma. I just listened to the Holly Staker podcast, and I don't think I heard you guys mention it, but it seems like in 2014, the Chicago Tribune reported that they had a link to a murder of Holly Staker 8 years later. It seems Delvin Foxworth was attacked and beaten in his home by 3 men, and one of the men was arrested. The other 2 suspects have not been named, but DNA taken from that crime scene matched the Holly Staker. Okay. Just thought I'd bring it to your attention. You guys are doing a good job. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, Gibbs, that case hasn't been that long ago, or that episode, but I don't remember. I don't remember whether we talked about it, whether we saw it in the research. I just don't remember, because once you get so many episodes away, a lot of that information leaves the noggin.
And I don't remember what we had for dinner tonight.
Well, that's a different problem.
Yeah.
But we appreciate the voicemails. We actually are not getting as many voicemails.
No, they're down low
during the Corona quarantine.
Yeah.
Crisis thing that's going on. So we'll just play which ones we get. I mean,
we
don't need to have a certain number.
Dial them up.
But it's a good time to leave one if you've been thinking about leaving one.
I'm going to leave one.
You should leave one.
Yeah. I'll say.
Make it coherent.
Well, that's I guess you're going to know which one's mine.
All right, everyone. That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.